Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't seem to want to do the other way, which is kind of odd, but that's okay.
Okay. So going from left to right, that's Eugene Turner, who's at the Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge, and he's a wetlands person working on the Gulf of Mexico, trying to see whether we can save any portion of it. And then that's Ellen Darden. And Ellen, I don't know exactly how to describe you besides that you're an activist. Do you want to describe yourself?
Yeah, I think for purposes of this, just a community activist, kind of a community organizer with a social work background, my profession, and I have an academic background also, both of practice and academic. So, but for purposes of this, that's who I am today.
Okay, so Ellen, is that in social work, that your academic background?
Yes, primarily. Okay. That and marriage and family therapy.
Okay, well, we need some family therapy for our politics days. And that's Jim on the right. And Jim, were you saying something? I couldn't hear you.
No, I was just
chewing your carrot?
chewing my carrot, yeah. It's my 10 o'clock carrot.
Okay. And Jim,
what is Jim's last name, and where is Jim from?
I'm about to tell you.
Oh, sorry.
Jim is Dr. James White. Gene is Dr. Eugene Turner. And Jim is the director of the Institute for Arctic and Alpine Research at the University of Colorado in Boulder, which is next door to where I'm heading this afternoon. And I am Aviva Rahmani, an ecological artist who's been working on the Blue Trees project. So the topic today was going to be post-election strategizing. And I was just listening to Bernie Sanders on WNYC, and one of the things that people were saying was that everybody's still in too much shock to even consider strategy. But I think we have to, especially about the environment, especially about climate change. And the things that I'm hoping to talk about today are, Jim, I know you always have an inside track, or more of an inside track than the rest of us, on what's going on politically and what kinds of strategies people are discussing going forward. So I hope you can fill us in on that. And Ellen, you're actually working as an activist to see what we can do about natural gas pipelines specifically. And Gene, you're trying to see whether we can restore any remnant of this poor little planet we're all on. And I'm trying to go forward as an artist to put some things together. So which one of you would like to go up first and try to address this question of how and if it's even possible to strategize to go forward and save us all from climate change? Dead silence, eh?
Well, I'm not sure about strategy per se as a group, but I think the foundation of this is your kind of personal approach and having some equilibrium about what you yourself are valuing still, because I think there is a little bit of uncertainty about what to do as a group, and there may be some sense of that the kind of whole has been introduced into this validated sense of not hate, well maybe, but just equilibrium about individual values, and I think we need to remind ourselves that we have not invalidated this sense of community, sense of love, if you may, and individual worth. It's just that we've had this other element in a way validated. That doesn't mean other things have been invalidated, which is something we often accept when we see these divisive things. So I think that's a starting point before we go forward. Well, as we go forward with a group strategy.
Wait, can you be a little bit more specific about what you mean by validated or invalidated?
I think a lot of the conversation during the campaign has now emboldened negative actions, in my opinion, or it's going to, and we need. I accept that they've been validated in a certain social sense. I don't accept them as their values, but I think you're going to see a lot more divisiveness on part of individuals. You've got this guy Bannon in the White House. I just think that's a terrible outcome myself. And I think the kind of campaign that was run was meant to, as Trump said, it didn't matter, it worked, you know, he was able to be divisive. So I think that has emboldened and kind of authorized other people to speak on negative aspects in public, you know, and to think that it's okay to call somebody names and do other things. So that's what I meant.
Well, one of the...
It's going to be everybody's reaction, but I think it's more public, and it's been encouraged by the omission of other things.
Yeah, on WNYC, they were saying that Steve Bannon is a master media manipulator for these political mandates. Somebody came on and said, oh, no, he's really a good guy because he's very inclusive. He has a whole bunch of conservative gay men on his staff. And I thought, oh, all right. But one issue that's come up, and maybe we can get back to this later, it's come up on Facebook, I rose it, and other people brought it up. When do you hold people responsible for validating an evil agenda? If we agree that it's evil to allow climate change to accelerate, which this administration apparently intends to do, and to persecute people who are different than us, I would say that's evil. And then do you go further and say that it was passive agreement, pacification, I guess, to vote for this person who has that agenda? And I know a lot of people are saying, well, you know, a lot of people voted just because they are economically challenged or they want change. But if the price of that challenge and that change is possibly the death of other people, then that's problematic, I think. Ellen, would you like to work on this? And then I'd like to hear Jim's thoughts.
Yeah, so one of the things, I live in the middle of Appalachia. I mean, we are Appalachia. I work in Appalachia. I also have my PhD, whether that makes any difference or not. One of the things that we're seeing, that I'm seeing, which I think is very hopeful, is that an enormous amounts of people are getting engaged in marches and walks and are having meetings, organizing meetings in their homes this week that have never, ever been involved. I have a lot of 20 to 40-year-old Facebook friends who are primarily women, but some men also, who said we were complacent. We thought these issues were taken care of. They're not. We're pissed. And we are mobilizing in a way that I've not ever seen before. Because what happened was they thought it was all just non-issues and other people had taken care of it and the previous generations of organizers, and they went, oh my gosh, our complacency put us in this position. And they literally are having meetings in their living rooms and connecting with organizing groups, and a lot of them on climate change. And so, you know, it's been very interesting to watch And so, yeah. So I guess I would say, do we sit around and wait? I would say no. We need to mobilize we need to take this moment of energy where people are angry and turn that energy into connecting them into activism, because that's, into organizations that are making a difference. And so we have a window of time. I don't think we should wait for the shock to fall off. Take that shock and anger and change it into actual ways to help. And that's coming from a social work organized perspective, but it's also coming from a family therapy model. When people are traumatized, one of the ways out of trauma is to invest into something that you think is going to make a difference. So anyway, so I just thought I would share that. I think we need to be very wise. I think we need to be very active, but I don't agree with the sit around and wait model at all. I think the time is now. I think it's a week and a half. People they're ready to figure out how to respond.
Ellen,
and that's in rural America. I'm talking rural America, where, and many of those voters that voted for this change probably would have voted for Bernie Sanders. They just wanted to be recognized and noticed.
Ellen, can you tell me any of the people that you're involved with organizing or observing organizing, were any of them Trump supporters that feel like they're having a morning after effect?
I think so. The ones and I'm not that in touch with them. I am reaching out to some of them. The ones that are really having the morning after effect are the NRA folks. I mean, I think a lot of Trump's election was NRA. I think the NRA mobilized much more so than is being talked in the press. Those are the folks that are going, yeah, we're not going to have our guns taken away. The other folks voted to be noticed and changed, and they really aren't racist. They really don't. That's not why they voted for him. Some are. I don't want to pretend they're not. But for example, in these gas pipeline fossil fuel fights right now, what we're finding is that we've got Republicans and Democrats arm in arm because of property rights.
Right.
In fact, one of the politicians that's been the most furious about this, they're not furious about the gas or the pipeline, they're furious about eminent domain and the property rights, and we've gotten a more positive response from a very, 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 very staunch Republican congressman. That's been the most positive response we've gotten. So, yeah, so I think the political scope is totally different, and the way we move forward, I don't know. It's just a new ball game, but I certainly do not agree with the way. That's not, you want to get people when they're angry.
Jim, would you like to jump in on this? Because I know you have a somewhat different perspective, and you're also very in touch with the international climate change community. What are your thoughts along these lines of how we think about strategy and how we might go forward, what opportunities there might be, what doors are probably closed?
Well, obviously the bad news is that the U.S. is not likely to curtail greenhouse gas emissions, or not likely to, or is more likely to back away from environmental regulations. I think we're going to see 4 years of damage to the environment, damage to the globe. That's the bad news. Certainly the kind of people that are being mentioned for EPA director and for other important posts, this is reminiscent of the Reagan years when, the foxes were originally put in charge of the chicken coop. And I would point out that there was a lot of pushback at that time, and I agree with Ellen completely. The only way that you're guaranteed to lose is to not do anything. We've got to push back. The silver lining, the good news to this, to me, if I had to try to spin it that way, is that sadly only 50% of Americans voted, which means only about 25% of Americans really voted for Trump. And so, and that's, I think that when it comes to issues like environmental protection, when it comes to issues like climate change, when it comes to issues like women's rights, I think it's way more than 50% of Americans in poll after poll that I've seen that support these things. And, I think that there's going to be sort of necessarily a backlash and a mobilization of people because they're not going to agree with some of the really far-right policies that, people like Bannon and the kind of folks that they're bringing in will push. They are fringe. Trump is fringe. They are in the 15% of Americans that you're not going to reach. And really what he did was he managed to take that 15% and add another 10% who either felt disenfranchised or just really didn't like Hillary Clinton. I don't know which, maybe both. But that was enough to get him elected president. And it wasn't a huge margin. It wasn't like a landslide. It wasn't like,
No,
I don't think the country has gone, I don't think the country has gone completely over the edge. I think what's happened is that a minority has found a way to get into power. I agree 100% with Gene. It is dangerous that these folks are given a voice. That is, if I had to point to one, other than the fact that I really think that Trump is a dangerous leader when it comes to interacting on the international stage, he has given voice to people who, they were there all the time, but they were marginalized in the sense that the rest of the population said, no, you can't go around with that kind of hate speech, or you can't go around saying those kind of crazy things. Now they feel emboldened, and that's a problem.
There have been about 400 hate incidents just in the past couple of days or something.
Oh, we've seen them here in Colorado. I've lived through a couple of Republican administrations, so this is not new. I think Gene's probably had the same kind of experiences. This is new in the sense that I had students and staff in my office in tears this past week, talking about, from a student point of view, I had students saying, is my degree worth anything? These are environmental studies students. What are we going to do? And I've had other students who said, we've got to fight back. We can't sit back. Tell me how I can do something. And then I've also had women staff in my office who, were, they felt completely betrayed by the election, and I agree with them. They were completely betrayed. I think that energizes people, and I don't want to turn this around and sound really optimistic, but I think that, me, go figure. But I think we have an opportunity here because maybe we hit that rock bottom that we needed to hit in order to turn around and say, hey, I ain't taking this shit no more. Anyway,
I think we did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to put my 2 cents worth in as an artist. I personally feel in physical danger now. I was already threatened last year by Spectre Corporation that they wanted to destroy me professionally. I now feel like I've got a target on my back because of my position on natural gas pipelines, and I can't really move the project forward without continuing to be visible. And I think that my position will be seen as increasingly radical, even though I hope to put a lot of emphasis on the art aspect and the conceptual and philosophical aspects of what I'm doing, but I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think that I will be seen as somebody who stands in the way of Trump's plan for Standing Rock and the rest of the world and his coalition with Putin. And those people don't compromise. They don't make nice. So I find that personally terrifying, and I've been trying to figure out how I look at that. There's the spiritual aspect, of course, but I'm not looking forward to torture, prison, or death, which may be some of my very real options. And granted, I come from a family that has experienced a lot of persecution in recent generations and other countries, but the hop, skip, and a jump from Russia or Poland around the turn of the century, or even more recently, to where we are right now with this administration, despite what people are saying about, oh, let's just wait and see what Trump does. Well, I think we have a lot of ideas about what Trump does. Gene, I'd like you to weigh in very specifically, going from the macro to the micro, about what you foresee for the Gulf of Mexico and restoration work in general, because as much as we're trying to stop the natural gas pipelines or get across ideas about climate change policy or engage people on an activist level, there's also the nuts and bolts of what happens to restoration projects. Ellen, Jim and Jean and I did a project a few years ago called Fish Story, and out of that we calculated that if we could regreen the earth by 36%, that was as of 2012, which is Jean's bailiwick, we could actually mitigate climate change by 2030. Well, obviously, we now have a major setback. Can you weigh in, Jean, about how serious this setback is in specific terms?
Louisiana voted, 2-1 for Trump. But they have a Democrat governor, and I am not going to sugarcoat. I mean, I don't know. The state has a lawsuit against oil and gas companies, which the governor supports, and it's basically based on my research from 20 years ago, which was a few technical embellishments since. I'm not a part of the lawsuit. I'm just saying the technical basis has been around for a while, and they finally decided to do something about it almost too late. But they are backing it, and they are going forward with it in kind of, zigzags. Originally the legislature said hell no, the governor said hell no, and it was started by an independent group in New Orleans. So, that's kind of a solidification of the ground a little bit. It was better than it was before, and we'll see what happens. I see the state restoration program, I think, is faulty in many ways, and it's going to face climate change, which seems to be more evident as we go forward, although there's a lot of resistance to dealing with it, because it's just kind of like an add-on contribution to chaos. I think, around here, the town as a whole voted for Clinton, the parish area. So I have students that are from outside the parishes, and we haven't discussed this in class, although I made a joke about it now and then. I know people are upset still, and the staff is probably upset that they're not talking about, because it's, perceived in some quarters risky. So I see a lot of uncertainty going forward. On the other hand, the problems haven't gone away, and the need to solve them has only gotten worse. So I think, for example, climate change, which is important on our coast, because they can't restore these areas with much more climate change. I'm uncertain about what's going to happen. I see a woefully unprepared staffing at the White House, irregular attention given at the top, I see a huge federal service that'll buffer a lot of this, but a lot of people are going to be pushed out by these somewhat angry people. You know, they're loyal is the first thing, not competency. And they're very skillful at the politics, and they've proven they've been able to batter people with, you know, responses that seem very strange. But so I'm uncertain about this. And if you look in the long haul of things, in 2 or 4 years, it may be very different from now. And I'm a little bit uncertain about the strategies, except for my personal ones, scientifically, you know, being at the university. But I don't know, Aviva, and I don't want to be despondent, but you know, I know individually we have to understand that we have this personal, we're okay, and we should go forward in whatever way we can. So, and I have friends that are despondent, and that's what I tell them. You know, you're fine. You take care of your house as best you can, and reach out when you can go out. But remember that the center is okay, which is your kind of value system. You know, you don't need an echo to invalidate that, and I think that's what people are struggling with right now.
The uncertainty?
Whether they have been invalidated in some way.
Oh, I see.
You know, they don't need somebody else to tell them they're okay. They're okay. They can smile. They can go to a movie. You know, they can talk with friends. You know, and we have to be a little more cognizant about this disharmony around us, of course. And people are going to have problems.
I don't feel okay. I feel okay today, but going forward over the next 6 months to a year, I'm not sure I'm okay, honestly. Ellen, I'd like to go back to you, and I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about this issue of the uncertainty and the possible realistic danger that activists especially, even more than an activist artist, are facing, and what kinds of conversations are you hearing about that?
Oh, I would like to add, I'm sorry.
Please.
What did I want to add? You know, I think just having everybody it's common sense to have these things done. You know, I'm saying with your artists, with activism, with data, it's just common sense to go forward, and that's the kind of way we should approach the problems. It's not in the drama of it, although it may become that way, but we have to be calm in the center. We have to be calm in the center and go forward. I'm sorry, Ellen.
No, that's okay. I appreciate you adding that in. A couple of thoughts, Aviva. I do want to go back kind of to what you were saying, Aviva. I have not talked to a single woman since the election that feels validated. Every single one feels totally invalidated, like, oh, we really aren't important, and now we have an election to prove it. And that's why they're angry, and that's why they're like, wow, it's worse than what we actually thought, especially the 20 to 40-year-olds who thought that our generation had taken care of a lot of it, even though the signs weren't there. You know, that, you know, their wages were still low and blah, blah, blah. So the cover has been pulled off, and nobody can ignore it anymore. I think, Aviva, you were... Say it again.
I said we did try to tell them so, but they were so sure that they had it.
Right, exactly. And now they are, and that's why they're mobilizing. And in what I've been hearing is we were complacent. We were wrong. And a very stark awareness of that. And some men, mostly the men are on climate change. You know, the women are on women's issues, and the men are, that's what I'm seeing. But, you know, and my little world is not the country as a whole. However, we are much like Eugene in Louisiana. I mean, I lived in Texas for 12 years. You know, I know I now live in Appalachia, and so I live in a little blue county, the only blue county in Appalachia in Virginia, in southwestern Virginia, but, you know, right outside that. So I think the fear is real, Aviva. I think that those working in climate areas, the companies are huge, especially the gas industry. It's huge in West Virginia. I think that fear is real, but one of the things that folks have done, it was before the election also, but are really mobilizing more, is to pull together, to band together so that no individual is sacrificed. And that's where I think that organizations and people coming together and doing it together, it makes it hard to go after one individual. So the more we join forces, the harder that becomes. I mean, look at all the protests nationally yesterday with regards to Standing Rock. They were happening everywhere, not just in the United States, but around the world. I mean, that's an unbelievably quick mobilization, and I have no doubt that one of the reasons that was so huge yesterday is because of the election last Tuesday. I don't think it would have been anywhere near as large without that election.
But it hasn't even been a blip in the media. I didn't see anything in the New York Times about it.
Oh, I saw an article come through on the online New York Times.
Oh, then please send it to me.
I may have deleted it already. I'm pretty sure I did.
No, I'll Google it. But I just wanted
maybe it's the wrong source, but
I wanted to go back.
Anyway, so but I do think the fear is real, and I think we need to acknowledge that we need to make sure that individuals are not sacrificed, because that's what they want to do on all levels of climate issues.
I want to go back to the issue of eminent domain and the possibility that eminent domain is a way to unify disparate groups. I guess the one thing that I have is a nagging worry in the back of my mind is what happened in Oregon this past summer when that group took over the public park. And I wonder if it's not a double-edged sword. And Gene, you looked like you wanted to comment on that. Would you like to address that?
I couldn't believe the outcome.
Yeah, very surprising.
And now basically other groups have been kind of authorized in a way to go forward and try the same thing in their area. I mean, to go occupy it. You're not going to be, they're being told, you know, the courts don't care. Or, you know, or the
juries don't care. Juries don't care.
Maybe that's peculiar to that place, and then one of the organizers, a couple of them are still under trial for another issue, but, you know, they had guns going in. They occupied the place. They disrupted civil service. And that's the kind of same thing on a national scale now, of course, of the election. So I want to, I think some men have a problem with this about women being treated before this and were aghast at the election, and now that, and they see the women, I hope, are going to tell them if they didn't know, but I'm sure a lot of them do know that this is a problem. My own wife, you know, was having nervous, it was very tense. So, I mean, she had knots in her stomach the night before and the night after, and I'm sure that went on a lot of homesteads, really.
I had 3 children crying.
And
3 girls crying.
That's
20-something girls, women.
Yeah. So,
bawling.
So I think that one reaction is to make sure that the men, in particular, have some positive response to that, saying, "I feel the same. I don't feel the same thing, but I know, I see what's happening. I see it. You know, we can't know the same thing individually, but we can see it and be empathetic and also understand that this cannot continue and treat it that way."
Jim, you've often spoken about the link you see between women's rights and climate change. How were you able to respond to the students and faculty that came to you recently since the election?
Not effectively, I can tell you that. Yeah, this is it's a fundamental problem. You know, I really believe that we will not move forward nationally nor globally with lasting environmental reform if we continue to have women treated as second-class citizens, if we continue to have minorities treated as second-class citizens, if we continue to have the poor treated that way. I've spoken out on that over and over again. I think this was a big step back, the election was, for the environment on levels that we don't even recognize right now. You know, some of the obvious things like, yeah, there's going to be more CO2 in the atmosphere, but I also think that there's some lasting damage in terms of empowering women that we're going to have to deal with, not just for the next couple of years, but it's going to last a while. And that's, you know, actually a piece of this that worries me the most are the damage that could be done over the next, 2 to 4 years that's going to last a lot longer. You know, obvious, the Supreme Court. But I don't know, what, in my little sphere here, we're concerned about what they're going to do with NOAA and with NSF and with NASA and
the EPA.
In the EPA, and you're basically, if indeed those agencies get cut, and that's what he said he was going to do that. Now he's also said he's going to do a whole bunch of things he's now saying he's maybe not going to do, but he's enlisted a lot of people into his inner circle who are really radical in terms of, yeah, let's cut the EPA, let's cut NOAA, let's cut, NASA should not be looking at planet Earth. NASA should be looking at Mars. He's talking about some very serious cuts, and that has lasting impact. And, it's not just the fact that, I lose my summer salary. It's, I spoke with 2 prospective graduate students this week who, were rethinking going to graduate school in this area because they didn't know, first of all, they didn't know, what the future held, but also very, in a practical sense, they didn't know whether there was going to be any funding for them. And that's there's some, that's real. That is a real concern. We're in that season right now where we're talking to people about going to graduate school, and this is probably the first time I've had some really difficult discussions with them about, I don't know whether there's going to be any funding. I don't know whether, whether we're going to go through a real dip in masters and PhDs in the environment because the funding's going to, dry up at NOAA and at NSF and at NASA. These are, this is the sort of lasting part of this that really has me concerned for the long haul. I'm very energized about the moment. I think a lot of people are pissed off now in ways they weren't pissed off before, and we should use that energy and we should push on that. But they can do some damage that will echo for 10 years down the road.
I'd like to go back to something that's kind of my favorite dirge, which is the idea that we are self-destructing as a species because we've overexpanded our resources, and the likelihood is that we're just going to be left with pockets of refugia where our species will survive, and God help us, that may in fact be the white supremacist survivalists that survive. And I wonder, how do we there's, God knows, there's tons of animal behavioral evidence that this is how species respond to stress. They do self-destruct. So how do we reconcile that biological imperative that we may be dealing with and some of the avenues for hope and optimism that we're trying to look at? I know it's difficult, but I wonder, Gene, you obviously are Jean and then Ellen.
No,
I have to go, so
Oh, okay.
I need to sign off. I've got to get to a meeting, so I just,
Yes.
yeah, real quickly, I was just going to say, I meant to share earlier that I see this as like a tsunami or a tidal surge. There's going to be a lot of damage, but the tide, as Jim was talking about earlier, I mean, it's only 25% of the boat. I think that other 50% is waking up, unfortunately, after the tsunami hit. So I think there's some serious real damage, but I think the tide is clear. But anyway, but I hate to go. It's been great to meet you guys. I look forward to continuing, and so good luck.
Thank you for joining us, Ellen, and we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Okay, sounds good. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Jean, you wanted to say something.
What was that?
it's just something I have. No, I don't know where it came from.
Commentary from the arts.
Really?
So, Jean, what did you want to say about this?
Well, I've been doing this for a while, and when I started out, I was uncertain about a lot of aspects about capitalism, and it gradually kind of grew. And then about 20 years ago, I heard somebody voice that, in an open meeting. And there have been several books since about, this or that. And capitalism has a well-established kind of ability to form its own wake, or pieces of it at least. And I think some of the resentment, if you look at it, has come from kind of the industrialization of the agriculture, for example, which has definitely made small towns less valuable. And when you go to that model a little further, you have industrialization of urban systems, and they just move around, and who cares what people are, because they're going to be part of it. And I think that has developed a lot of resentment, which unfortunately is confused with ignorance. But I think you may find a lot of uncertainty about their social situation because of the economics, and that's why the young people voted, like 93% of the people under 26 who voted for Clinton. And it was huge. And I think there's potentially a reform in capitalism, if not going strongly away from it shortly. Now, I don't know how that'll turn out. But that's basically an extractive, aggressive view of the world. It's a horrible model. Greed is a horrible model for governance. And these reforms, some reforms may happen, maybe it'll be sufficient. But I think it's a question of whether it's going to be fast enough and deep enough. And I think they're all tied together. You extract minerals, you extract energy, it's a very non-human sense. We have other human values other than trying to procreate. And some of them are good and some of them bad. And I don't see greed as being a good one. So I think it's kind of embedded in the conversation. Whether the form of it is helpful or not, and eventually and fast enough is another thing. But that's got to do with how we treat minorities, women, extraction. Long-term. There's an island in Indonesia called Bali that has this water culture. It took them 1,000 years to get it right, but they have it right. And it's a very equitable agronomic system. And it was really destroyed, and almost destroyed by the Green Revolution, it was called, in which they applied too many fertilizers and this or that, and they had basically a greed outlook. Now they've stepped away from it. But they still apply phosphorus, which they didn't have to do. They don't have to do. And Steve Lansing, if you ever look on the web for I could send you something, but it took them 1,000 years to figure this out. But it was an island, a small island, and it was culturally, kind of together. And the not an important part, the essential part is it's embedded in a social system that understands how the mind works and how to ameliorate, ups and downs, and how to integrate not only the ecology of the area, but the kind of mental, social aspects of the area. And they have lots of rituals, you might call them, but they have to do with reinforcing the kind of integrative knowledge and wisdom in the system. But it took them 1,000 years. This is now a World Heritage Site, but sorry?
I was just going to say that the IPCC references the parallel significance of cultural aspirations, and we do have so many examples from indigenous cultures that they figured it out much better than we have in the West with all our technology. And they have, as you said, integrated the cultural and the social mores with the practical, I don't know whether you want to call it scientific, but certainly the knowledge of how to manage resources and biogeography. Jim, I'd like to hear what your colleagues are saying at the institutional level of how to respond to the current situation. What kinds of conversations are you having with other administrators or even across institutions besides that the money's going to be cut and we're going to lose some of our finest young brains?
Yeah, we're having, I think, conversations on two levels. One is how do we continue the basic research that we need to do in order to understand, you know, the planet, understand climate systems, understand ecosystems, et cetera. How do we keep that going? We don't know yet what's going to happen to the federal funding stream, but we need to be prepared for cuts to that. So we're having conversations at that level. I think we're also having, I know we are also having conversations at the level of individual rights kind of issues. I've had some pretty ugly things said in my presence about women and about, we have a lot of Latinos in this area, so about Mexicans, and we are pushing back, and certainly from my interactions with other administrators, trying to find ways in which we can assure people that that universities, if nowhere else, are safe zones. That these are places that value diversity, that value women, that we do not tolerate hate speech. We do not tolerate the kind of behavior that has been emboldened these days, this past week, and or even earlier than that, really. And I think that's very valuable. I've had folks at LGBTQ, say that it made a huge difference to them to have that little sign on the door saying, this is a safe zone. This is a place where you don't have to worry. And I think that's, I see that pushback happening more and more and more. And at the highest levels of the university. The first thing that we heard from the chancellor post-election was not issues about, funding and stuff like that. It was about making the university a safe environment for all of the members of the university community. Because that was one of the big issues, that one of the underlying problems, probably one of the bigger underlying problems that immediately cropped up. As you said, there were hundreds of incidents around the country, probably, to be quite honest, tens of thousands of incidents around the country. You just don't hear all of them. But that is, we've been trying to find ways to make sure that we push back as hard as we can and as fast as we can on those kind of behaviors.
So there's two ways to think about to push back, and one is to just kind of like, you say this, I say this, it's kind of a, and I'm not saying you're doing one or the other, but I just have to remember that this force we're pushing back has to be transformed. Yeah. So that's inclusive. Yeah. I'm not saying accept the idea, I'm saying the person. So we have to be careful not to engage in the same way they they, in effect, have tried to push us away. I think
No,
you know,
no, I agree 100%. If nothing else, it's an opportunity to embrace and talk about issues that we didn't talk about before. I've had more conversations about women's rights in the last week than I've had in the last 5 years.
That's interesting.
And that's, people are willing to talk about these things now. And the same is true for, gay and lesbian issues that, people are, these things, you hear about them in the news, but, you don't necessarily have people come up to you and say, hey, I'm really upset about this, and I need to talk to somebody about this. And that's been really kind of interesting. And no, I agree with you, Gene. You've got to take the high road on these kind of issues and these kind of confrontations, which is what we've been trying to do. We're looking now at putting signs up in the entryway to these new buildings we have, saying that these are safe zones, and we value all people. We just want to be upfront with it. We don't want this to be just something that people, say, okay, it's on their website or something like that. We want to put the signs up. We have a flagpole, believe it or not. We inherited a flagpole, and in this last week we've had a couple of conversations about what flag to fly, and a rainbow flag is something that we're thinking about flying. Somebody wanted to fly a pirate flag, which I thought was an interesting.
I like that. I vote for the pirate flag.
We're just going to go buccaneer on them and go. Anyway, no, it's just been an interesting. I'm sure we're going to get in some trouble with somebody at the university over this, but that's the. Can't win.
The Japanese and Korean flags both have a sun on it, and what they represent is a rising sun, not a setting sun. So, if it's understood that way, it's a matter of re-energizing a renewal as opposed to the dark ages. Yeah.
No, personally, I don't know what's coming. I told my wife, it's entirely possible that we won't have summer salary coming up because most of that comes via NOAA these days. And they may get pretty well hacked. I said, personally, we may take a hit on this. But I think in the long haul, there's going to be so much pushback against the, this minority of people who are, currently in charge, that I think the end result is good.
From your lips to God's ears, Jim.
Maybe.
I want to thank you, Aviva, for holding these things. One example of why,
These are a little bit of catharsis here. I think I've said this more than once. This is therapy for me. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking. At least you get to voice these things with cohorts. And I've always said that this is a very mini think tank. I'm not sure where it all goes, but that's how I've always seen it.
Well, all right, well, I've got another meeting, so.
Yeah, we're all going. I'm heading to the American Studies Association conference, and I'll be very curious to hear what my colleagues there say. Yeah. So to be continued, my friends.
Yep. We'll see you guys.
Bye. You too.
Keep smiling.